Friend, today is the day. We are making homemade croissants. The goal is to make not only just plain delicious croissants, but I want to try to make a cheese and ham croissant and maybe an almond paste croissant. So making croissants is a 3-day process, but the majority of the work is totally hands-off. I have done this one other time and I completely missed half a cup of butter in the lamination portion and they turned out fantastic. So if I can mess up that big and they still turn out really good, I think we can do this together. So I'm gonna follow the recipe step by step and try not to miss a half a cup of butter this time, but we are on this road together. I've only done this one other time. They turned out fantastic, so let's see if we can make some delicious croissants. We're gonna go in chronological order, step by step by step, and make these delicious pastries. All right, so the first thing, I will link the recipe that I'm following down below. So I am gonna weigh out all my ingredients. I'm gonna put it on grams. And the first thing I'm gonna weigh out is my water. Next, we're gonna weigh out our milk. Perfect. Sugar is next. Yeast. And last but not least, our flour. You all know that when I'm in the kitchen, I normally make a ton of different things at one time. Not when I'm making croissants. We are gonna be focused on this one particular task at hand, and we need 1,210 grams of flour. That's 1,219, and that is perfect. So this is really easy how fast this dough comes together. We do need to measure out some butter, but we have to mix our dough together first before we measure out our butter. The last ingredient is our salt, and we're gonna get that in our mixer along with our yeast and our sugar. This is why it's nice to have it pre-measured out so that all we need to do is dump everything into the mixer. And I'm going to mix this together. We're gonna knead this for 5 minutes. So this has been kneading for 5 minutes now. So I'm just gonna let this sit, and we actually need this to rise for 10 minutes before we add the butter, which we still need to measure out. And while this is resting for 10 minutes, we're also going to work on making our big sheet of butter that we are gonna use when we actually start laminating the dough tomorrow. So we need 114 grams of butter in cubes that's chilled. And I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it into cubes as I put it on this scale. The one thing you do wanna get special when making croissants, the only kind of specialty thing you need that you might not have in your house is European style butter. European style butter has a higher butter fat content than just traditional butter you would buy in a US grocery store. And so that is an important key step when making croissants. So here we have 94 grams. 114. Okay, perfect. So we've got our butter here. I'm gonna set this here and we're gonna grab even more butter, 6 sticks of butter, because we're doubling this recipe. and we're going to make it into one big block of butter. This is gonna be incredible. So this is the step where I on accident put a half a cup less butter than I was supposed to. So this time we're gonna use the correct amount of butter, but let me tell you, they still turned out so delicious. All right, that's 678 and we need 680, so that's good. So we're gonna go with that. And then the first time I made this, I took this block and I started pounding this block out whole. And then I watched another video that I thought was brilliant to make this a little bit easier. Put your butter up on its end and cut it in half. So that way it's already half as thick as it was just a minute ago. So it's gonna be a little easier to flatten it out. Doesn't have to be perfect.
So we have one of the two main components going, which is the dough. Now the second main component is the butter. So we need to create a nice butter slab that we're going to use to laminate our dough with. And this is what is going to give us our quintessential croissant layers. So I'm going to take these blocks of butter that I cut in half and put them onto a piece of parchment paper with another piece of parchment paper on top. And then I'm gonna take my rolling pin and I'm gonna pound and roll this butter out until we have one solid block of butter that is just under a ½ inch thick. The butter that I'm working with is pretty chilled, but I did take it out of the refrigerator about an hour or two before I did this. I didn't want it completely room temperature, but I also didn't want it refrigerator temperature. So now that I've got it pretty close to the size I want, I am going to take some parchment paper and fold it into a square. And because I'm doubling this recipe, I had to use 2 pieces of parchment paper. And I'm working on trying to make square edges so that I can turn this over and I can use my rolling pin and I can roll the butter into those corners so that we have a relatively square block of butter that we will put back into the refrigerator, and then tomorrow we will get it out and we will use this to laminate our dough. So you can see how once you've got a nice parchment paper pocket, you can square those corners off.
The butter slab is done. It's not perfect. I could have gotten a square out and squared it up, but it's gonna be okay. I think it's gonna be perfect for our needs. So this is going in the fridge and we're not gonna take this out until tomorrow when we actually start laminating our dough. You could technically, I think, do this the next day, but it says to do it on the first day. So that's what I did. So in the fridge, this butter goes. Now we're gonna turn our attention back to our dough because this has been resting for 10 minutes. And what we're gonna do is slowly start to incorporate this butter into the dough. This is gonna be about a 10-minute process. This butter is chilled, but it's not rock solid. So we are gonna turn the mixer on. So this has been mixing for about 10 minutes now, and we've got a nice elastic dough. So what we want to do is take our dough out of our bowl, and we're going to have it do its first rise. And we're going to knead it just a couple times. This dough is absolutely just beautiful. It's soft, it's silky, it's just stunning. So I'm going to put this into a ball. We're going to put an X in the top of it. This will help when we go to roll it out. Just like that. I'm going to put this in this bowl and we're going to cover this with some plastic wrap. Now we're going to take this ball of dough, we're going to set it on the counter, and we're just going to let it hang out and rest for 45 minutes to an hour until it's 1.5 its size, and then we will move on to the next step. Our dough has risen, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop this in the fridge, and I'll see you back tomorrow when we start to laminate it. It is the next day, and we are going to do the lamination portion of making croissants. And this is the part that can be the tricky part. So what I did about an hour and a half ago is I actually took out our butter slab that we made yesterday so that it could come up more to room temperature. Now we don't want this melty or warm, but we want it malleable enough so that when we put this butter slab into our dough, we can roll it out and it's not gonna break up into a bunch of bits. It'll roll out with the dough. So what you want, according to the recipe, is you want to be able to bend your butter without it cracking. So I think we're there. I think last time I did this, my butter was too cold because it cracked a ton when I was rolling it out, and I didn't think it was going to turn out at all. And remember, I put a half a cup of less butter than I needed into it, but it still turned out really, really good. So I'm hoping that this, though, is a better texture for what we need. So I've got my butter, my silicone mat laying the opposite direction of what I normally do because that's the way I'm gonna roll out this dough. A cookie sheet, parchment paper, saran wrap, and a rolling pin. Now we're gonna get our dough. Now when we're working with this dough, there's obviously yeast in it, and we want to work the butter into it, make the layers without this dough really starting to rise. We don't want it to rise until we've done all the lamination. So we are going to, and we need to control the butter. We don't want the butter to get too warm. So we're going to be controlling the fermentation of this dough by working with it, sticking it in the freezer and then the fridge, working with it and continuing that process. This is what it's looking like. So this dough is going to be pretty stiff because it's got butter in it and it's cold. And we are going to just start rolling it out until we are the width of this butter and twice the length, because we're going to fold this butter into this dough. And we're going to try to keep this into a rectangle. I do not want it getting wider than my butter.
So what I'm going to do is keep my butter close so that I can keep checking the size. And then I'm going to keep rolling this out until, again, it's twice its length. Because once we have it twice its length, then we can actually fold this butter into our dough. So I'm going to go ahead and put this slab of butter in the middle of the dough, and then I'm going to fold the two ends together. I'm going to pinch that seam closed, and then I'm going to pinch the two sides together so the butter stays where it wants to stay. We will end up kind of trimming some of this off in a bit, but for now we're going to go ahead and encapsulate the butter. I'm now going to use just a little bit of flour to start rolling this out so we can do our first fold. Now this is why you don't want the butter too cold, because when you're rolling out the dough, you want the butter to slide along with the dough and not crack. So here I have some air bubbles. I'm just going to take my cake tester and pop those and continue to roll those out. And then once we have it to the length we want, we're going to do what's called a bookend fold. So we're going to fold the two ends to the center, cleaning up or straightening up the edges, and then we're going to fold this in half, and then we're going to wrap it in plastic wrap and chill it because we want to control the fermentation on the dough. We do not want this dough to start to rise until we're ready for it to.
I had this dough in the freezer for 15 minutes, and then I just had it in the refrigerator for an hour. So now we're going to do our second roll out and fold. So we're going to do a total of 3 folds to get the amount of lamination we want. And we do need to trim the edges a little bit where we have a little excess dough. By doing this, we are going to help ensure better lamination throughout. So here you can see dough, butter, dough, butter, dough, butter, dough. And we are going to triple this, or I don't know the math actually, you'll see. but we're really going to increase the amount of layers we have in this next step. So here you can see dough, butter, dough, butter, dough, butter, dough. And if I cut this, again, you can see why I'm trimming it. That's just dough, there's no butter. So I want to make sure that there's butter and dough when I go to fold this up. This is what happened to me last time where we got these kind of broken bits of butter. I can see and kind of feel where the butter pieces have broken. You can see it a little bit better here. And so I'm just gonna keep going with it. It worked out last time. And so what I'm gonna do is now chill this in the refrigerator, and then we'll come back to do the second roll out and fold.
So this is now chilled, and we are going to do our final fold. So I'm going to roll this out just like I did last time with just a little bit of flour. You want to try to avoid using too much flour, and then we are going to do the fold. So one thing I've learned now from making these twice is that I need to start out with a little bit warmer of butter when I start the lamination part. I'm so used to making pie crust and puff pastry where you want that butter to be as cold as possible. So I was kind of coming into this with that mindset, but we are chilling this dough so much throughout this process because we are trying to prevent the dough from starting to rise that I don't think that I need to worry about the dough being so cold at the beginning of the process. I think that if we started out with a little bit more room temperature butter, we would get a little bit better of an even lamination. But even with the breaks in the butter, these croissants still turn out fantastic.
We are officially done with all of our folding. So we have all of our lamination done, but now what we need to do is flatten this. So this is going to be our final thickness for when we go to shape them. Josh was just in here and I was telling him how stressed out I am about this. And he said, you were stressed out about it last time and they turned out amazing. So we are just going with that hopefully this is gonna turn out amazing. So what we need to do is get this really thin. So this is gonna take a little bit of time to roll this, not really thin, but about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just gonna roll this out until we get to that point. So I'm gonna pop this in the fridge, and you could put this in the fridge for 4 hours to 12 hours. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the fridge for 12 hours because it would be pretty late by the time we were to bake them. So I will see you back tomorrow when we shape these croissants. Good morning. It is early and we are going to go ahead and shape our croissants and bake them this morning and see, I think I can actually do it just like this, and see if we are able to make a delicious croissant. So the first thing I'm gonna do is actually prepare my oven for the proofing process. So I want my oven to be humid, but not hot, because when we have these rise, we can't have it above 73 degrees, I think, or we could run the risk of melting our butter. So I have some hot water here that I'm putting in a 9x13 baking dish. I want the water to actually cool off, but I want to trap some steam in the oven. So I just put hot water in there. It's going to collect a bunch of humidity in there, and the water is going to cool off so we don't have a hot oven, and we're going to proof our croissants in this oven. And I wanted to get that done before we make our almond paste filling and we shape our croissants, so that has time to cool off. So I'm just grabbing a whisk here. So I'm gonna make up some almond paste from scratch. You can buy it, but it's kind of expensive and it's really easy to make, especially if you have the ingredients on hand, which I happen to, because we make almond paste every Christmas for a pastry called banquette that is a traditional pastry that Josh's family, they're Dutch, and they have it every Christmas. So I happen to keep almond flour on hand in my freezer. And to make it, all we need is 1 cup, I'm gonna half my recipe, 1 cup of almond flour, a half a cup of granulated sugar, a half a cup of powdered sugar, a good pinch of salt, almond extract. I always try to make sure I don't overdo it on the almond extract because that can be pretty powerful. I'm going to do a little splash of vanilla. I'm going to start with 1 egg. My eggs are very large because they're from my chickens, so I might only need 1 egg, but I can add more if I need more. Oh, it already smells so good. I think that is a good consistency. I don't think I want to add another egg because it will be too runny. So I'm just going to get this fully incorporated, and that is our almond paste, homemade, all done. I want to be able to track the temperature of this oven before we actually put the croissants in there. So I thought I would just grab my thermometer. I'm going to stick that in there so that I know that I'm not over about 73 degrees when we proof these croissants. Now we're going to shape these croissants. Now, I don't know if I've mentioned, but I am not a professional baker by any means. And so I am going to shape these in the way I shaped them last time I made them, and we loved them that shape because we could actually make like a sandwich out of them, which was pretty phenomenal. And it was a lot easier than having to shape it in the traditional croissant shape. So we're going to go ahead and do it the way I did it last time. And I'm just going to take my dough out here. It is on a piece of parchment paper. And the way I shaped it last time was very, very simple and straightforward.
And that was just, I cut them into rectangles and then I rolled them up and they were kind of like a hot dog shape. I don't know if there's a proper term for that or what. I just know that that's the shape I made them in and they turned out fantastic. So I wanted to do that again on this day, but the coffee hadn't fully set in and I cut my dough into 8 rectangles, and I need to get 16 croissants out of this dough because I doubled this batch, and 1 croissant recipe makes 8, and so I didn't want to make massive croissants, so I figured this would be the perfect opportunity to cut 4 of those rectangles in half on a bias, which will get me some traditional crescent shaped croissants. And I'm kind of glad that I made that mistake because it was kind of fun to actually try my hand at making a croissant in the proper shape and not me just taking my creative liberties and making them in the hoagie shape. And then when I got to making the filled croissants, I realized I need to flatten this dough out and try to get 2 croissants out of each one of these one rectangles. So I about doubled the rectangle in size. I cut it in half and then I filled it with our filling. The first filling is the almond paste, and I kind of crimped the edge down. I flattened it a little bit so that when I rolled it, it would flatten a little bit more or sit a little bit more even on the croissant. And then I tried to put it seam side down onto the baking dish, and that way it can rise on the baking dish. I definitely would consider myself a cook, not a baker, but I really am having fun kind of pushing my baking skills. And croissants, I would say, is probably one of the most technical things I have tried to date. And I would say the results have been pretty fantastic. So nowhere am I perfect at it or have mastered this skill at all, but the intimidation factor is no longer there. And I definitely have learned a couple different things throughout the 2 times I have made them. And so it seems doable. Sometimes when we try new recipes, at least for me, it's just a matter of trying it the first time and getting over kind of the intimidation factor. And then it becomes fun to try to perfect it. So these ones I am filling with ham and cheese. I have 2 crescent shape that are ham and cheese and 2, well, I'll tell you in just a second. I actually think I tell you what I have of what. So we're going to cover it and let this rise.
I just checked the oven temperature with the thermometer that I put in there, and it says that it's 84 degrees. So there's no way I can put these in there yet because the butter will melt. So my kitchen is about 70 degrees right now, give or take. And so what I'm gonna do is just wait for that oven temperature to cool down. I don't wanna open the oven to cool it down because then I will be releasing all that steam that we have in there, or humidity. So these take, at least from my experience last time, a good 4 to 5 hours to proof because the dough is so cold. And so I'm just gonna let these sit on my counter until my oven is about 70-ish degrees, and then I can pop these in there and let them finish proofing in that humid environment. But they look pretty good. For how worried I was about them, I'm pretty happy about how they're looking. So we have 5 of the almond croissants. 4 of them are just the hoagie roll shape. That's what I'm calling them because that's what my mom called them, and that's just what I've been calling them. 1 is the crescent shape, and then we have 5 of the ham and cheese. 1 is the crescent shape, and 1 is the oblong shape, and then we have 2, 4, 6 of the just plain crescents. I was so nervous about this, and I think it looks pretty good. So I'll see you back when we pop these in the oven. Friend, it is 3 o'clock, or it's actually 3:20. I have been babying these croissants since, I think we got them shaped at 8 a.m. this morning. I think they're ready to go. So we are finally gonna take these out of the oven. It took 3 hours for my oven to cool down before I could put them in the oven, and they've just been hanging out in the oven since then. So now I'm gonna preheat the oven to 375, and we're gonna put an egg wash on these croissants. One reason I like the shape of these a little better than these when I did it last time is you don't really want to get egg wash on this area where it's laminated and cut. So you have to be pretty careful and just get the egg wash right on the top part. And I only have a regular brush. Some people use a paintbrush to do this.
I think they also cook a little bit more evenly because they have the same amount of dough from one end to the other. They're not thicker in the middle, but that's just from my little tiny experience.
So we have some layers there. The question is, when I bake them, is the butter gonna just melt or is it gonna puff up into a beautiful croissant? So I'm just gonna let these sit here until the oven preheats for probably It'll probably take me my oven about 15 minutes. I almost forgot the slivered almonds. I meant to get sliced almonds, but I grabbed sliver. I think these are gonna be just fine. And I think I'm gonna leave a couple well, no, I'm gonna go ahead and decorate them all. Make sure that's the almond one, not the ham one. Are you okay with almonds?
Yeah.
Okay, Josh is here.
That's what it is, right? Like
Yeah, these are almonds. Yeah, it's almond paste. I'm nervous about putting them in the oven. I'm not sure if they're ready yet, but they've been out of the refrigerator since 8 this morning. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, almost 4 o'clock. That's 8 hours they've been rising. What?
Should I be filming you?
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
your face?
Well, I'm not sure. We need to cut into these to see how they turned out. A lot of the butter came out of the croissant. The only question is, do they taste good? So here, let me get them on the counter. These look a little different. There was not all this butter soaking through when I made them last time. So I want to get them off this cookie sheet quickly and onto a cooling rack. I'm gonna get this one out. I was a little worried about them, so 2 of them I flipped over. And so I almost basically kind of like fried the croissant in its own butter. My theory on why this happened is because the butter was too warm going into the oven. But they look pretty good once they come off the cookie sheet. It's just when they're on the cookie sheet, they look a little questionable. But I want to get them out of this butter. Now that I've taken them off the cookie sheet, they really don't look that bad. These are the ones that I flipped over. These are the ones that are stuffed. These are plain. And the ones that I didn't flip over look pretty good. Now the question is there gonna still be a buttery flavor with most of the butter, or I shouldn't say most, but some of the butter kind of coming out of the croissant? Last time I made these, I didn't really have that problem, but I also didn't follow the recipe properly. I used a half a cup less butter per recipe. So for this amount of croissants, that would have been equivalent of 1 entire cup less than what I did here, because I was trying to follow the recipe properly. So I don't know if that can't be the issue. The issue is, I think the croissants themselves were too warm going into the oven. To have the best gauge to see how well these did, I'm gonna cut into the plain one. Oh my goodness, friend. Look at that. I do see lamination in there. So that is pretty awesome. Now the real test, the taste test. We got the crispy bottom, and that is because basically our croissants kind of fried in their own butter. It is showing up a little darker for you than it is for me. That is fantastic. That is so good. I was on a roller coaster of emotions making these croissants. I want to get more proficient and better at it and kind of understand the pitfalls. But for my second attempt, I am pretty happy with that. I really like the crunchy bottom. That adds some nice good texture to it. So I'm going to cut into the almond one and into one of the ham and cheese so we can see what those look like on the inside. So this one didn't get quite as dark. This tray didn't, at least. And here's one of our almond croissants. I really like this shape. I know it's not traditional. Look at that lamination on that. Oh my goodness, my friend. That is beautiful. So we've got plain almond, and this is one of the ham and cheese. All right, friend, we got lamination on all of our croissants. Now to give them a taste test. I'm gonna try the ham and cheese one first. I can already tell you, it doesn't look like it fully got cooked all the way through the ham and cheese, because I think the moisture from the ham and the cheese probably contributed to that. But when I reheat these in the air fryer, I'm sure that they will be delicious. That is very good. That is gonna make a delicious breakfast. And now the one I'm the most excited about. This one does look fully cooked all the way through. The bottom is perfectly cooked. And there's a nice big center of almond paste. Well, friend, 100% I am happy and thrilled with the results on this. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, but it is absolutely delicious. If you want to try making homemade croissants, I highly recommend it if you are in for an adrenaline rush or a emotional roller coaster, because it is one, but the results are pretty fantastic. I think I want to try it again where I maybe do a side-by-side comparison where I follow the recipe again exactly, and I use the correct amount of butter, and then I do one where I cut the butter in half by 1 cup again, and see if I can get the same results I got last time, because they were a little bit more tender last time, and that could be due to the fact that not as much butter kind of oozed out, but there's still so much butter in these. They're delicious. I do like this shape, even though I know it's not traditional. I like that shape because I can make it into a sandwich or something like that. I did have Josh give these a taste test, and he really likes the banquette one, or not I'm calling it banquette because that's what I'm used to calling when I make the almond filling. He really likes that one. I don't know if I would do the ham and cheese one again, just because I could just make a plain one and add ham and cheese after it's cooked, and it would be easier to get it cooked properly if I don't add the ham and cheese while I'm trying to proof it and bake it and all those types of things, because that's what I did last time I made it. I just took the plain ones and we turned them into sandwiches, and it was fantastic. So, successful. I can't tell you, think it's successful, then I didn't, and then I think it did, and then it wasn't, and then it was, and then it wasn't, and in the end, it was delicious. I'm so excited. So thank you, friend, for being here again. If you've been here before and kind of followed the journey of making homemade croissants, if you're new, welcome. I greatly appreciate every single one of you who takes time out of your day to spend time with me. If you want to see how I made homemade donuts, I'll pop that video, and homemade bagels. The word escaped me. I'll put that down here. You can go enjoy between now and my next upload. 2024 has kind of been my year for pushing myself into new baking adventures. And I would say croissants are kind of the Mac Daddy of homemade or of pastries in general. And so I'm really excited about this. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.